All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a moment to thank Kim for coming on the show to help me with this demonstration. Kim, how are you today?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Michigan.
You guys
68
have had,
degrees and sunny. Not a cloud in the sky.
that's
It's
excellent.
gorgeous.
You guys have had a rather long winter, so it must be nice to enjoy a spring day.
It is, absolutely. No more freezing cold temperatures and ice and wind and snow.
I do not miss getting up early and scraping anything off of my car so that I can get onto a road that I'm going to slide all around.
Exactly.
And although this
Some days
is
are iffy.
and this is our time of year when we're going to start hating the weather because it feels like the sun is just magnifying itself directly at you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We have days like that here too, as I'm sure you well remember.
Oh yes. Well,
90, 90 degrees, high humidity.
well, that's the thing is they say that a dry heat is more comfortable than humidity, and to a certain extent, I would agree. But when you go outside and you feel like the sun specifically hates you,
Yes,
I
I
don't
can
know that it's
only.
better.
No, I don't know that that would be better either.
Well, thank you so much for popping on and helping me out with the call.
Anytime, anytime, Scott.
We'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
All right, we are now into the next part of the video where I go over how I edit the show. The screen may look a little bit different from what you were just looking at. That's because I already ran all the plugins and thought, well, there's no point in you sitting here watching all the little lines go as I run them one by one. I showed you that in the other video, so here we're just going to start with the editing. So I'm just going to do this a section at a time. This is a very short podcast. Obviously, it's like 1 minute and 25 seconds. Mine have gone as long as 2.5 hours. So imagine this times 2.5 hours. It's a lot to edit, but basically everything you do, you take one step at a time. Now, I process all the audio so that the audio is clean so that when I go to edit, I don't try and edit out audio artifacts and things like that that the plugins can handle. This makes my editing process a lot easier and saves a ton of time. Trust me, I've done it the other way. You end up sitting there picking out all kinds of things that can just be swept away by the filters. So don't do that. Clean it first, then edit it. And if you guys have other processes that you think are more simplified than mine or have equal or better results, please let me know. I'd be very interested to hear. You can write me at scott@scotthaskin.com. But in the meantime, let's first of all thank you, Kim, for coming on and taking time out of your day with your family to help me with this. And it was great talking to you. We've known each other for most of our lives, so it was pretty good to catch up with her and take some time to do that. So on purpose, I recorded this a very specific way. And when I was working with Jennifer on the first call, I didn't think about doing this, but I should have. And so Kim was gracious to help me jump in and help me with the second part. So what we have is we have a lot of overlapping audio, and you can see very easily just looking at it. And this doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, but right here, you can see she and I are talking at the same time. Now she's on track 1, I'm on track 2. Now, this may or may not be an issue, and that's the thing that you have to decide as you go through each section and see what happens. So let's listen to the first section, see how it sounds, and we'll go from there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a moment to thank Kim for coming on the show to help me with this demonstration. Kim, how are you today?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Michigan.
You guys
68
have
degrees
had
and sunny. Not a cloud in the sky.
that's
It's
excellent.
gorgeous.
You guys have had a rather long winter, so it must be nice to enjoy a spring day. Oh, yeah. And that'll happen. During the course of the podcast, you may think that your guest has stopped talking and you start talking and then they pick up and you don't realize they're going to do that. So, you either try and talk over them or you stop and be polite and let them continue on. What I've done here with Kim is a little more extreme than what usually happens on the show. And of course, I did that for the purpose of explaining to you guys how I edit the podcast. But I heard something here on the first pass. I want to hear it, see if I hear it again. This demonstration, Kim, how are you today?
Doing great.
Okay, so there's a little bit of saliva. I'm not sure if it's on her track or mine. It's very common. Let's see if we can isolate it. I'll start with my track. And Kim, how are you today? Okay, I had a feeling it was on hers because a lot of times when you hear that, it precedes someone talking, or if they're taking a pause, it precedes them speaking again. So it's probably on her track. Okay, so it is. Now let's see if we can see it. It's so infinitesimal, it's not even visible. Oh, it actually is. Okay, so it's that little bit right there. So what I would typically do in a case like this, if I wanted to, it's not really necessary because they are very normal sounds, but you can take them out.
Doing great.
And then it's just gone. So up to you, however you want to do it. There may be some plugins that work to take care of that for you. I don't know. I haven't found one myself. Not that I've worked with yet anyway. I know there are some de-essers out there, but they don't necessarily take away those kinds of sounds. If you find one that does, for the love of God, let me know. Okay, so the first section there and then is okay. And then here's where it gets a little bit icky.
Again, 68 degrees and sunny, not a cloud in the sky.
Okay, so as I instructed in this case, Kim just kept talking. I said, if I interrupt you and you're still speaking, just keep speaking and ignore me because I wanted to create this kind of a situation. So what she's saying, she's just going along with her sentence.
Beautiful day here in Michigan, 68 degrees and sunny, not a cloud in the sky. It's gorgeous.
Okay. So that's a really nice little sentence. And we definitely want to keep all of that. We don't want to lose any of that, her enjoyment of the beautiful day in Michigan. So let's see what I had to say that was so important I had to interrupt her. You guys have had... Okay, so what is it? It's complete nonsense. Now, here's why I would have done that, or why this may sometimes appear, is I thought she was done talking.
Beautiful day here in Michigan.
You guys... I should have known better, though, because she was on an upswing. Now, when somebody is on an upswing and they're talking, they're usually not done unless they're asking a question. So since my phrase is completely nonsensical, it's a fragment of a thought, we just take it out and don't even worry about it. And then we move on to the next part.
Sky.
That's excellent.
Gorgeous.
You guys have had a rather long... Okay, so she really still wasn't done. Again, I thought she was. She kind of paused a little bit before she added "it's gorgeous," and I started talking. So the question is what I said important? That's excellent. You guys have had a rather long winter. Okay, so I'm showing agreement that I like the things that she's saying, and that could be important. That could be nice also to validate her thought or feel like, we're kind of here in this together. So you definitely don't want to lose that, but it's not going to work talking over each other. So we're going to want to space that out a little bit. Now, here's where it gets tricky, and if you don't do this right, it's going to be harder to get the rest of it right, or you'll have to resync it up or go back somehow. So if I just take this audio, my track, and move it over to where it fits in with her, let's do that and see how it sounds.
It's gorgeous.
That's excellent. You guys have had a... Okay, that's not bad. And I'm going to turn me down a little bit because it's way out of balance.
It's gorgeous.
That's excellent. You guys have had a... Okay, that volume-wise, that's better. So here, this sounds really good, right? I kind of come in a little quick, but not too bad.
It's gorgeous.
That's excellent. You guys have had... But since I didn't shift the rest of the audio, here's what happens. Long winter, so it must be nice to enjoy
it. It is, absolutely. No.
So I haven't really finished my thought before she's chiming in, but she wouldn't have chimed in until I stopped talking, most likely. So now all the rest of the audio is out of sync for the entire podcast. So you don't want to do it this way. What you want to do is you want to cut a little hole in the other audio right there, just a little gap. And this is another reason why you process it first, because if you have background noise in here, then it's going to go pff, pff. Again, there's going to be a little break in the background noise. So you want to get rid of all of that first. In the old days, I had to edit all that out and add in room tone and all that. But with Audio Dynamics IDC, the Instant Dialogue Cleaner, getting rid of all that background noise really takes care of that. Now, there are a little bit of bird sounds in the background because she was outside when we recorded. And I'm glad she did that because sometimes I've had people record in their car, in a cafe. I've known people that have recorded while they're at an airport because that's the time that they have available. You never know what the background noise of your guest is going to be. So in this case, there's a little bit of bird here and there. When Loretta Swit was on, her dog barked a couple of times. You know, it's, you never really know what you're going to get. So you want to be able to minimize that noise as much as possible, unless you want that ambience for some reason. But that ambience is also going to have to be playing when you're talking, and then it's going to dip in and out, and it really just gets kind of messy. So the cleaner recording you can get, the better. But to shift all this into position, I have to shift the remaining audio together. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to select my move tool and move everything shifting together. And then I'm going to give a little bit of space there before I respond. And here's how we have it.
It's gorgeous.
That's excellent. You guys have had a rather long winter, so it must be nice to enjoy a spring day.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, so that sounds much better. Everything that my guest said is audible. Anything that is supportive or pertinent that I've said is audible. We're not talking over each other, and we're not losing any of the continuity of the rest of the audio. Now, this section here looks good. I don't see anything here. If you want to play it and make sure there isn't some tiny little audio fragment, that's fine. But you'll find that that takes a long time to edit. Now, this, I could tell you, is probably a laugh. The way that the audio looks, and you'll get used to the audio patterns and the waveform just from the repetition. I did a lot of audiobook editing, so I'm very familiar with laughs from mistakes in the take, and if it's part of the story or whatever. But you really do get used to what an audio signals look like, and you can kind of pinpoint what things are as you just see them visually after a while. So laughing is okay, I bet. Let's see how this sounds.
Okay.
It is, absolutely. No more freezing cold temperatures and ice and wind and snow.
I do not miss getting up early and
Okay, so that's not bad. A little bit of talk over laughter is fine. You're not losing anything. Her laughter is coming through, showing that she's enjoying it, and I'm not disrupting that. So that's okay. Now here I see we have another little audio fragment. Let's see what that is.
car so that I can get onto a road that I...
Okay, it sounds like a breath. Yeah, so she was taking a little breath. If it was right before dialogue starts, I may keep it in if it's not too harsh. But in this case, it's just insignificant. It's not contributing to the conversation, doesn't help enhance it. It might take away from what I'm saying. So this I would probably just go ahead and clip out.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's see how that next part sounded.
I'm going to slide all around.
Exactly.
And although this
Some days are...
Okay, and here's a little fragment in my track that we can see. Yeah, that's just a little chuckle. But,
and although this is...
now there's a breath.
And
let's see if that intrudes on what she's saying during the podcast.
And although this
some days are iffy.
And this is our time.
Not really, but we do have another step that is going to level all the volumes. So we may want to take that out just in case when it's leveled, it gets too loud.
Exactly.
And although this
some days are iffy.
And this is our time of year when...
now hers was part of a laugh, so it's a little bit different.
slide all around.
Exactly.
Mine was just an out of place breath.
Directly at you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We have days like that here too, as I'm sure you well remember.
Okay, so you can hear a little bit of the birds. You may have heard that when we did the recording a little bit louder. The automatic or instant dialogue cleaner, I'm sorry, really cleaned up a lot of that background noise. Here you can see a little fragment on mine, but a lot of times these things will pop up in Cakewalk by BandLab. I don't know if it happens in other digital audio workstations, but there's nothing there. And you can see on the meter that nothing shows up, nothing's indicated, and you can't hear anything. So I don't know what causes that, but I could tell you just to be safe, I don't need it, so I'm going to get rid of it.
Here too, as I'm sure you well remember.
Oh, yes.
90 degrees, high humidity.
Well, that's the thing is they say that a dry...
Okay, so let's deal with the end of this first. At the end of this, she goes back into a chuckle, and I'm talking over the chuckle, so that's fine. What we really want to deal with is this section right here, where I think the first half is something we would want to keep, but the second half is not, because I'm asking a question and I stop myself over her dialogue.
Oh, yes.
90 degrees.
See, I'm agreeing with her, but then I'm starting to move into the next question. So we probably want to see if we can get rid of that well. And to do that, I'll stretch out the audio a little bit so we can see it better.
Oh, yes.
90.
Now, we have a really nice, clean potential break right about here in this area. So let's just take that out and see how it sounds.
Oh, yes.
90 degrees.
Okay, that doesn't sound bad. Let's see how it sounds on solo because I have a feeling it's going to sound like it's cut off.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it just all of a sudden, like a door to a vault has been closed and you can't hear me anymore.
Oh, yes.
Right. But when you play it in conjunction with the rest of the audio, it sounds fine.
Oh, yes.
90.
So those are the kind of things that you might just want to run a quick test on if you're not sure. See how it sounds in the flow of the conversation. You could spend a lot of time trying to perfect all these little nuances. You could spend days editing your show. For an hour-long show, it usually takes me about 40 minutes to edit it. Most of my shows go between an hour and an hour and a half. I've had them, like I said, go as long as 2.5 hours. So you really don't want to spend a lot of time on things that you don't need to do, but you want the audio to be clean. So if that sounded bad, I would sit there and work with it so that it doesn't distract you from the conversation. I like leaving this part in. I could take the whole thing out and it wouldn't impact anything, but she's commenting on my memory and I'm validating her comment with my, oh, yes. So I really don't want to lose that if I don't have to. If there is a break, there's a lot of things that you could do. You could trim it with a little bit of a quick fade. I'll show you what that would look like if you were to do it so that the end doesn't trail off too much. You could just take like this little section right here and highlight just that little bit. And then maybe do a fade with a curve like this that might smooth out that sudden dead air sound. That's what I usually do, but I find that I really don't have to do that often anymore. Most of those cuts for me these days are fairly quick, but it's something that you're going to have to play around with and learn. It may be an easy thing for you. It may not. If you have any problems that you can't get past, shoot me an email. Let's talk about it, and I'll see if I can help. So here now we're back into the next section of the audio.
Well, that's the thing is they say that a dry heat is more comfortable than humid.
Okay, so here I don't need to listen to myself through all of this. If I really want to, I can listen to the whole thing after the edits and see if there's any more trims I need to do. But keep in mind, if you've already cut little bits of the audio, like I have here, and then you go to shift something in the middle, you're now shifting everything up until that next cut. So now you're throwing everything out of sync. So if that's the case, then I would suggest bouncing your tracks to other tracks so that it takes those cuts out and just leaves the gaps the way that you would want them to be. And then you can go back to shifting audio normally. But for a section like this, I basically listen to these kind of transitions where there's dialogue over dialogue, any weird artifacts, like if there was a little bump right here, like we've seen, or any long spaces in between. So if this was a bigger space stretched out where there's nothing happening, I would check that. But apart from that, I don't go back and edit every single thing. If I hear something when I'm recording, I might jot down a time. But remember, if you've moved the audio, you've now moved that time reference, but it's going to be fairly close to where you pinpointed it. So if I say at 17 minutes and 36 seconds, I thought there might have been a pop that I heard during the recording. So I'll mark down 1736. When I go back to 1736, if I've edited anything in the first 17 minutes that caused me to shift the audio to the left, well, that's not going to be as far as 17 minutes and 36 seconds anymore. Now it's going to be prior to that. So I might jot down a couple of words that also associate with what that marker is or the area that I want to revisit to make sure that I'm finding the right spot. Anything to save you time. Unfortunately, there's no Control F in audio, so you have to be very accurate with the time, or at least reasonably close. Mark down something so that you know that you're actually listening to the right part. It's just something that we have to be a little bit responsible with if we want to be efficient. So let's hear how this transition goes into the next part.
It's you?
Yes.
I don't know
only...
if it's better.
No, I don't know that would be better either.
Well, thank you so much for...
Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Let's break it down. Let's start with the first part where we talk over each other.
I don't know if it's better.
No, I don't know.
Okay, so let's see what's important here in the dialogue. What she's saying is this.
I can only...
So she's agreeing with me, but she's not giving a complete sentence there.
I don't know that it's better.
where what I'm doing is I'm replying to this clip right here. So there's a couple things that we could do. I could leave it as is because you can really hear what both people are saying. It's not a hugely important detail, but what I'm more likely to do is probably something like this.
I don't know that it's better.
No, I don't know that that would be better.
Now, here's how it could go.
Yes, I can only.
I don't know that it's better.
So there's really a lot of ways. I don't really want to cut out the audio of what my guest is saying, but if it's a fragment, I may take that out just for the clarity. But I could also shift it in a way that it would make sense as well. So I could cut this and just, whoops, don't do that. I could cut this and just give it a little bit of room so that you can hear what both of us are saying. We're not really missing out on anything, and it's just going to give a little bit of clarity. So if I make those little bitty cuts so that I can separate the audio and move things around, I could just move that there, and we'll see how this sounds.
I can only.
I don't know that it's better.
No, I don't know that that would be better.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, so that's not really bad, and you would only do that for clarification because it's hard to tell what two people are saying when they're talking over each other, and your listener is only going to be running through this at one time. They're not going to keep rewinding to try and figure out what that was. It's not relevant. It's not important enough, but it is a charming little moment that we shared together, and you really don't want to lose it. So you can leave it as it is, or you can edit it out. Just give it a little space so that everybody can be heard, and it really doesn't sound like it's out of bounds of the conversation.
Yes, I can only.
I don't know that it's better.
No, I don't know that that would be better.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, so that takes care of that part. Now let's look at this next part, which is this really horrible sounding intake of air, like I've just come up from a sewer and I need to breathe. It's awful, but let's hear it. Well, okay, that's got to go, right? Like I said, if it's not an intrusive breath, sometimes, right before somebody's talking, they take in a bit of air. That's very common. You can use a deep breather. I know that Waves has one. I actually have it. I haven't really sat down and worked with it yet. When I first worked with it, I couldn't really get it to work with what I had. So I just kind of set it aside for a rainy day, which will come at some point. And I'll probably do another video saying why I think Waves deep breath is the best thing in the world. Who knows? But for now, let's see if we can just get rid of this altogether, because really I'm only breathing over her laugh. That's not a problem. What the problem is how just intrusive and just big it is. Well, I mean, that's just god awful. So you want to move your little bar as close to that as you can, and then just go ahead and widen that. And we can really see, here's what we're really looking at. Now you also see this tiny little dot right there. We can check that out. So it's really just a trail off of my laugh, like just the most minimal amount of laugh there can be. So we can just get rid of that. It's not even going to be audible. But here's what we really want to work on. So let's just take this out. And again, we have a nice little breaking point right there. If you zoom in enough, you can usually find a fine enough point to be able to get to it. So let's see what that is here.
Well, thank you so
See, not even a click, not a glitch or anything at all. So now let's see how it sounds together.
Well, thank you so much for popping on and helping me out with the call.
Okay, so that's not too bad, right? Sounds pretty good. Didn't take anything out that affected the conversation. But now we've got this little guy.
Helping me out with the call.
Little breath from Kim. So that we can just take out. That's not relevant to anything. It's just a kind of little distracting noise, and that does happen. Sometimes, like, you'll be talking to your guest, and somebody will interrupt them, and they'll be like, "Hey, just a second, I'm on the phone," or you get to hear these little whispers, and so you can take all that stuff out. It's not really relevant to the conversation. It can be distracting to the dialogue, so it's easier to just remove those from the existence of the show.
Anytime.
Out with the call.
Anytime, Scott.
We'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so there's a couple things I heard in here that we might want to revisit.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, did you hear that little sound?
You too. Bye-bye.
Right after I say you too.
You too. Bye-bye.
I don't know where that is. Let's see, because I don't see anything visually. So let's check Kim's track.
Take care.
Okay, it is on Kim's track. It's probably a bird. I'm going to say it's a bird. Let's just see if we can, just out of curiosity, sometimes I wonder what a sound is when I hear it. Let's normalize it, but not make it too loud.
All right, take care.
Yeah. Yep, probably a bird. So no problem. We'll just get rid of that altogether. She's not making any other dialogue here, so we can take that out.
All right, take care.
See, that's fine.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now there is a little tick here I hear at the end, and I also don't know which track it's on because I'm not showing anything registering on the meter because it's too quiet. Okay, we'll check her track. Nope, check mine. Yep, there it is. I don't know if you can hear it. It's just a very, very faint little tick. Let's see if we can enhance that a little bit. Yeah, so what that was probably me clicking the key. So we don't need that. We can go ahead and delete that. Now, the audio, when you export it, is going to run to the end of the last possible spot in the audio, which is going to be right here. So when we export it, that's where it's going to go. So that's pretty much the editing process. You just keep going until you've run out of podcast. I would recommend saving frequently. The other thing that you may not want to do is you may not want to highlight and delete while the audio is playing. That has locked up my system when I do it. I think I'll just take this little snippet out real quick while I'm listening, and it has locked up the system and caused me to lose, a good 20 minutes of editing. And then I have to go back and redo that. And now it's annoying because you've already heard it and you know what it's going to say, and then you feel like you're wasting your time. So play it safe, experiment around, maybe practice with it, see what your system can do. I always reboot before I start editing, and to refresh all the RAM, make sure that I'm working with the most powerful system I possibly can. So the next thing that we need to do, I would highly recommend saving this. I'm not going to save this for our purposes here, but I would save this if you need to, just in case for a backup, because the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to export this in a WAV file, because the next phase of the process is called leveling the volume. Now, there are brick wall limiters that you can use. My suggestion is to make sure that you're using something or a setting that says it's working towards broadcast audio. That's the key. That's what you want. And if you use that on every show, you're going to have a consistent volume. Recording in at a consistent volume or fairly consistent volume will also be very helpful because it's going to change how that limiter processes. But what we're going to do is use a program called Levelator. So first, let's go ahead and export this as a WAV file. So we're going to export the audio. We're going to go to my precious little folder where I keep everything in the podcast, and then I'm using this walkthrough videos. So we're just going to go ahead and save it right here into the walkthrough videos folder. And I'm going to call this, I always differentiate because there's going to be two files. There's going to be the WAV file, and then there's going to be the WAV file that Levelator outputs. So that will be very distinctive. So we're going to call this Kim for Levelator. I'm sitting at an angle from the keyboard, so that's the excuse I'm going to use for not being able to type well. My typing's actually gone very downhill over the last few years. I don't know why, but it kind of sucks. Okay, so that's all we need with this for now. We don't need this file anymore for anything, really. I keep everything on file as a backup until after the episode is uploaded and I verify that the sound of the episode is good and I don't have to go back and re-edit anything. You can save those if you like. Hard drive space is fairly inexpensive these days, but I like to go ahead and just get rid of it. And I've got so much stuff that I don't really need to keep everything. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go back and we need to find that file. And once we find that file, then we can go ahead and upload it into Levelator. And this is the only way that you can do it. It's very, very simple. We're looking for this Kim for Levelator file. You just take it and you drag it on top of Levelator. Let me move Levelator to where it's a little more. There we go, right in that cloud. So we just take Kim for Levelator, the WAV file, we drop it down onto Levelator, and then Levelator will run its magic. Now, these processes obviously take much longer if the podcast takes forever. So you definitely want to make sure that you are finding a convenient time to do it when you can tie up your computer and maybe while you're, set it and then go have dinner or go to the store or something. So here we have the Kim for Levelator file, which is the one that we used. And then we have Kim for Levelator.output. Output is the one that Kim for Levelator is the processed version of what Levelator just ran. So that's a very important file to keep. Now back to Sonar. So in Sonar now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to do our intro and outro for the show. This is going to be very important because this is going to be our warm-up before we bring our guest on or our advertiser on, and then our cool down after the episode is over. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to and we're going to go into the templates that I have, and we're going to find the in-out template. Okay, so I've got my two plugins on here, but we're not going to use those while we're recording. We're going to use those when we export. So we're just going to go ahead and record very quickly and just see what happens. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. See, I can't even speak today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Now, see, normally here I would just go ahead and start over. I'm not going to start the video over, but I'll start that part over. Sometimes I twist my tongue a bit when I record the intro. And luckily I do this when the guest is not there. Now I bring the guest on, we'll chat for a little bit, I'll hit record and I'll do the intro right before I bring them on. But this is the sort of the pre-roll for the show. Hello and welcome to the Haskincast podcast. My name is Scott and I am your host on this very special episode with my friend Kim. And let's bring our advertiser on and then we'll talk to Kim. Now, if I had an advertiser, I would be putting their audio in here right before I do the musical interlude before the guest, which we'll see. So then I will go ahead and I will record the outro. And I leave a little space after here normally. I usually just do it all in one track, but or all in one take, I should say. But I'll separate it out just for our purposes here because it's going to become one file when we export it anyway. But I leave a little gap to separate the intro and the outro so that I can cut them later, as we'll see when we go to the show template. Wow, what a great time. Thanks again, Kim, for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. All right, so that's me babbling, and I do that quite often on the show. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn our effects on. I've already got them set because I usually have a very consistent recording level from one show to another. These are the settings that I use. They are now on. So here is Wave Sibilants, and here is Instant Dialogue Cleaner by Audionamics, my favorite thing on this planet. And I've already got them set the way that I like them, so I won't be testing those here. And all we're going to do on this one is we're just going to export. That's it, just export. We don't need to bounce tracks. We don't need to do anything else. We're just going to export it. Now, we're already in the right folder, so what we're going to do is we're going to call this in-out for Levelator. And we want to do this again as a wave because Levelator only takes wave files. And this one's going fairly quickly. It's getting very warm in here without a fan. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can save this in case we need it for anything later. Again, I like to hang on to everything until I know that the episode is secure, but we can close it out because we really don't need it for anything right now. Now we can go back to our folder. I could have just left this open, I suppose, but I'm not used to doing things this way. So we go to walkthrough videos, and there is our in-out for Levelator. We can shrink Cakewalk down. Now, normally I would close out Cakewalk and keep the RAM, keep everything focused on just what I'm working on. So we'll go ahead, we'll drop this into here. This will just take a few seconds, and then we can move on to putting the final template of the show together. So again, we have in and out for Levelator, in and out for Levelator, output, and that is what we want. So now we can go back to Cakewalk. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the show template. Now this template already contains all the musical interludes that I have for the show, the intro, the pre-guest music, and then the post-show music, which I do my outro over. So the first thing that we're going to do is you notice that I have a marker right here. That marker is where I want my dialogue to start when the show begins. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and set the cursor there to match the marker, and we're going to highlight the dialogue track because that's where we want the audio to come in at on that track, and we're going to go ahead and do in out for Levelator output. Okay, so here is why I have this separation. Oh, there's normally a track here. I think I cut it out when I was doing the last template. All right, that's fine. So here's where the outro will go. We'll leave the intro where it is. We'll cut this, and then we'll just move this down here out of the way. We're going to need it later, but we don't need it right now. Now, also, I'm doing a very, very short intro this time. It's usually a few minutes. So the music intro fade is well beyond where the dialogue ends. So we're going to take care of that just for the purposes of the show. But normally, this is actually how long that pre-roll music goes on. Now, the first thing that we want to do here is we want to make sure that the audio lines up. I want the audio to start about where that cursor is. So there we go. And let's hear how it sounds. Hello and welcome to the... Perfect. That's exactly where I want us to start, right on that note. Hello and welcome to the Haskincast. So perfect. Now, if I had an advertiser, I would be adding an extra track, and I would put their advertisement right after the end of the dialogue. But first, let's go ahead and fix that pesky long fade, because we don't want it to be that long. We don't even want it to be as long as the dialogue. We're just going to go ahead and make sure you get the audio from the very end, and we're going to go ahead and just do a fade of it here. Hello and welcome to the Haskincast podcast. My name is Scott and I am your host on this very special episode with my friend Kim. And let's bring our advertiser on and then we'll talk to Kim. I actually kind of like that. Now I'm thinking if I want to change that or not. Anyway, I don't. So we're going to have the same problem at the end. You can see how much longer the music goes on beyond the dialogue. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this in a random spot, and we'll do a fade on this as well, just again for the purposes of how this show is going to look as opposed to the way the show normally looks. Now, if it ends on a bass drum like it does there, or a drum, sometimes I'll just go ahead and I'll do another fade on just the tail of it, just to kind of take that out and make it sound a little more smooth. Okay, that was a little too much. Maybe I will use... Let's try that one and see how it sounds. Maybe that'll be enough to take the drum out. Okay, that's better. Yeah, all right, I like that better. So anyway, normally it goes on as long as I had it set, but again, because we're using much shorter intros and outros, we just need to adjust that a little bit. Now, the next thing that I do, again, if I had an advertiser, I would be putting them after the intro. Since I'm not using one for the purpose of this, we're just going to go ahead and move over the music that is the prelude to our guest that separates the intro and the outro. Let's see how that sounds. Advertiser on, and then we'll talk to Kim. Yeah, that's not bad. I like the cuts to be pretty tight. I don't like for there to be blank space in between the segments. So that's actually not too bad. And then we'll talk to Kim. Yeah, all right. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to go ahead and bring in the actual interview. So again, we want to highlight the track that we want the clip to load into. And in this case, it is this one. So we're going to go ahead and import now the Kim for Levelator.output, because that is the finalized interview. And let's see where we're at audio-wise here. There is a slight delay of the symbol, or ring out of the symbol, I should say. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's a little longer than I would normally go, because again, I like things cut fairly tight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take... All right, ladies and... That's too much. I'm very picky. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's where I had it last time. But anyway, so that sounds pretty good. Now, the other thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and get the ending in there. So after the guest comes in, I start the music, I do my outro, and then the music carries the show through to the end. So we want to go ahead and select the track where the first clip is going to be, and we'll cut, go to the end, we'll paste, and now we just have to line things up. So this is where Kim says goodbye right here at the end of the clip.
Bye.
And you hear a difference in the audio too, how loud and even it is.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's actually pretty nice. Levelator does a really, really good job. It's nice if you help it along by getting the volumes matched as much as possible. Sometimes I have people that are walking around when they're on the show. Their volume goes up and down. So that's where the vocal writer comes in that I showed in the video where I was showing what plugins I use. It can be very helpful. So let's go ahead and move this into place. So we see where her last words are. And now we want to move this in. I use that bar to kind of set the pace here, and let's see how it sounds.
Bye.
A little bit too much.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, I like that better. Okay, so now since we have such a short clip, we want to figure out where we want it, and I would say maybe after this first part here. Wow, after that second bass note. Wow, what a great time. Thanks again, Kim, for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. Okay, that's pretty good. Now the last thing that we want to do, well, we want to go ahead and save this before we do anything that is destructive or potentially destructive. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to highlight recording automation on the music track that is the end. And also we want to go ahead and move the dialogue up here so that's all the dialogue is on that track. We can go ahead and get rid of this track if we want to. I don't normally, but I'm just going to do it because I need the room here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the mixer view, which in Cakewalk you go to views and then console view, and it brings up this this mixer view here. Now I'm going to go ahead and just extend that a little bit, and because I need access to the fader, I'll go ahead and move this all up so that we can see. And what I'm doing basically is I'm going to set the volume swell or the volume decline and incline upcline. This is what happens when I record late at night. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set the volume going down and then the volume going up to accommodate for this dialogue right here. Because if you don't, here's what it's going to sound like. Wow, what a great time. Thanks again, Kim, for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for listening, everybody. That's way too cloudy. There's way too much going on. So what you want to do is, now that we've set the ability to record the automation by hitting the right button, and again, check your DAW for how to do this. This is probably the only one I actually know how to do it in. When I did record, or I did edit a podcast in Digital Performer to see the differences, and it was pretty similar. It's just that, you know, one command in this DAW is this, and for another DAW, it's that. So it's really just knowing the nuances of what you're working with. But anything that I record on this fader is going to be recorded as an automation. So what you want to do is you just want to go ahead and get it started. Wow, if you tap the fader, it's going to put in a dot. When you let it go, it's going to put in a dot. So you don't really want to do that until you're actually ready to do it. Wow, what a great time. Okay, so what it did is it gave us 3 points here, and we really only need 2. So we're going to get rid of that middle one. What am I doing? Just hover over the middle one and delete the node. So the first one should be at 0 because that's where the fader was set. And this one, I can tell you just from experience in my situation with my volume levels, we really want that at -7.4. We're at -3.4. So we'll just go ahead and change it to 7 and see it drops down. Now we just want to check the placement and make sure that it is in the right place. Wow, what a great time. Thanks again, Kim, for coming on the show. It was great. Okay, that's not too bad. If you want, you can slide these around and adjust them. Just make sure that if you need to, that you readjust the volume level that they're at to meet your 0 and whatever your negative number is going to be based on what you're doing. So the nice thing here about Sonar is that to get the fade up, what we can do is we can actually just draw it, or draw the points of it. So I usually start it right about where the dialogue ends, maybe just a little bit before it, and then I'll do another one maybe right here. This one's going to stay at -7.4 because we don't want that to change. We don't want it to fade at all. We're just going to change the last one back to 0. So now we started at 0 and we're ending at 0 because that's going to bring the music back up to the level that it was at before I started rambling. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. So let's hear how that sounds. Wow, what a great time. Thanks again, Kim, for coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. So it doesn't take the music out so much that you can't hear it. It helps carry along the ending. It shows the audience or the listener that you're wrapping up the show, but it also doesn't interrupt the dialogue as it did before we had the automation on there. So basically that's the show. That's your template. So we can go ahead and squish this down. We don't really need to see it. And we'll go back up where we can see all the stuff. I'll show you the whole show as it would appear on the screen. If you could see the whole thing, that's it. So you've got your intro music, your dialogue intro, your transition music, your interview, your transition music with fade out and fade in, or fade down and fade up, and your final thoughts. So that's pretty much the show. And then what you're going to do here is you're just going to export the show. Now here's the trick that I learned. Fortunately, I did not have to learn this one the hard way. I actually did it right by accident and then found out I did it right by accident. So when you go to export it, you want to go ahead and export it as an MP3. And here's the reason. You're going to want your podcast distributed to as many places as possible. And there are some places that will not take a WAV file. They will only take an MP3. So if you only have an MP3, you're kind of screwed on getting onto those spots. And I can't remember if it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but as of the time of this recording on June 4th, one of those two, I believe, only takes an MP3. So you're kind of screwing yourself out of some visibility. If you have fans that are following you there, they're going to miss the episode. Not good. You don't want to start showing signs that you're inconsistent or that some episodes might not appear. Fans will go, you know, I don't know about these people. I don't know if I can trust them. Sometimes the episodes show up, sometimes they don't. I don't know what their brand is all about. If they can't get it together, I really don't care. And they're going to probably stop following your podcast. So that's really important. So here's the way that I do it. I'll go ahead and everything is on MP3 now. So I'll go ahead and name it. So I'm naming it episode 5 Kim. That's not the episode. I'm on, I think, 111. I'm getting to ready to record tomorrow. And we're going to go ahead and export it to whatever folder. But here's what happens on an MP3. You get this little dialog box where you can change things. Now, I always export it at a bit rate of 192. I like the quality. I like the file size of it. It seems to work better. I've been doing this for years. There could be something better by now. I don't know. I do not enable a lower high pass filter because I've already done that in the processing. So I will go ahead and enable some info to be encoded into it. This being episode 5, I will go ahead and mark it as track 5. Then I put in the title, my name, it's the Haskincast podcast. And then I recorded it in 2020. The genre is podcast. And you know, those little dialogue bumps that I'm giving here, like genre, whatever I said, it just proves I'm not scripted. I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of go, here's what I want to talk about, and I jump in and start doing it. So change the copyright. I can't remember where it is on this version of Cakewalk by BandLab, so I'm going to have to find that and update the template so I don't have to do that every time. But basically, there you go. So then you just export it, you've encoded it, and you've run all the processes. Basically, what you're doing here is you're just merging all the tracks together into one file. You're adding that little bit of automation on the outro, and you're putting this into an MP3 that you can then upload to whoever your host is for your podcast. Now, I'm currently using Podbean. Podbean distributes to Google Play, to Spotify, to Apple Podcasts, to iTunes, I'm still not sure I know what the difference is between those two. And a bunch of other places that I don't know where it goes, but I know that, what's the big one? Stitcher is not one of them currently. But that may change in the future. I hope so, because I like Stitcher. I know a lot of people listen to podcasts on Stitcher. But as far as I know, Apple Podcasts is still the #1 place that people listen to podcasts. So make sure, if nothing else, that you're going with a distributor that uploads to Apple Podcasts. So that is, that's about it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to show you the documentation and how I go ahead and distribute the podcast to different places that I post it. One thing to know is that the within your host, there may be additional automated places that it will post to for you. For example, Podbean, I can post to my Facebook page. I can post to my Facebook like page for the podcast. I can also post to Twitter and to LinkedIn and they used to do YouTube, and then something happened and they don't do YouTube anymore. But you can go into the media and download the MP3 version of the podcast is always available from the time you upload it. But what you really want to do is you want to wait until the episode is distributed. From that point, you can go into your media manager and you can download the MP4 or MV4. I can't remember which one it is. That's the one that you can upload manually to YouTube. And so I would highly suggest doing that. And that gives you the distribution to YouTube as well. Remember to fill the forms out accurately. If you do have an advertiser, please do make sure that you're marking that you have an advertiser in that question box. There's a good chance that if their filters catch that, you could get kicked off. You don't get back on YouTube, I don't think, if you get kicked off. So I wouldn't do that. Just make sure that you're upfront and honest about it. If you do have an advertiser, that's awesome. You want to tell people, hey, there's something cool I'm going to tell you about anyway. So that is it for this video. Thanks, guys, for watching. I know that this was a bit of a long one, but I think that we covered a lot of ground here. And honestly, this is really the bulk of it. It's the recording and editing, running the filters. It takes a while, but you're not sitting here just doing that. You're doing other things while the computer does its thing. Come back and check it and see if you need to start the next plugin running. But for our purposes here, this is the bulk of where you're going to spend your time. And the rest of it is very simple. And we'll cover that in the next video. Thanks, guys.